Okay, Mark, are we recording?
Yeah, we are. Sorry. If you like.
Brilliant, thank you. Okay, welcome everyone to this year's CSU edX. This is day one, session 1.2, so stream one, session two. We have a great program for us today. I think Mark and I are probably going to have the biggest challenge in terms of trying to keep very passionate academics on track and in their time frame, which is always a good problem to have. So thanks for joining us today. So we've got 4 sessions, and then we'll have some time for questions and answers at the end. In the meantime, though, if you're really inspired or provoked, as we saw this morning with lots of provocations, please feel free to put something into the chat. First, I'd like to just do an acknowledgement of country. So I pay my respects to First Nations elders, past, present, and emerging across the many lands where Charles Sturt University campuses, students, and staff are located. In particular, I acknowledge the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra, and Biripi peoples. I also pay my respects to any First Nations colleagues present in this session and with us today. So, as I said, we've got a great lineup for all of us today. We've got 4 presentations. The first one is Dolores Dooley, and it's being co-presented by Jane Lawrence as well, and it's been compiled with a lot of help from Sam Jakimovitz as well. And it's called Exploring Innovative Assessment Design to Support a Greater Alignment Between the Midwifery Student, Industry, and University to Drive the Student Learning Experience. Our next one is Kathleen or Kate Smithers. Her presentation is Preparation in Pedagogies for Australian Honours Students, a Scoping Review. Our presentation following that one is Alexander Tynan, Investigating Best Practices into Integrating Project Management Frameworks into the Research Processes of PhD Candidates. And our last but definitely not least, my former School of Humanities colleague, he's still in School of Humanities and Arts, or whatever we're called now, is Sam Bowker, The Art of Everywhere Else, a tour de force of public lectures. So with that very brief introduction, I am going to hand over to Dolores, who is going to be starting our first presentation for us. Thanks. And a reminder that this is being recorded for all of us as well. So thank you.
Great, thank you, Kelly. So as Kelly just mentioned, we're presenting on exploring an innovative assessment design to support a greater alignment between the midwifery student, industry, and the university to drive the student learning experience. So just first up, a little bit of background. So midwifery registration in Australia, it requires completion of a program of study accredited by the Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council, and it needs to be approved.
Dolores, we've just lost your sound a little bit. I think you've muted.
We can't hear you, Dolores. Can you still hear me, Kelly?
Yeah, I can hear you. Yeah.
We can hear each other, but we can't hear Dolores.
We just can't hear Dolores. And she might not be able to hear us either.
Yeah.
She can. Can she do something? I don't know.
We lost you, Dolores. We can't hear you.
Stanley Kelly, I'm trying to unmute Dolores, but I can't from my end. Sorry.
Okay, so I can take over.
Okay.
I'd love to. Oh dear. Lucky I know the slide. So just a little bit of intro and background. Sorry. Am I right to go?
Yes, please. I think
okay.
Dolores
a little background
hasn't realized. So keep going. Thanks. Sorry, Jane.
That's okay. Midwifery registration in Australia requires completion of a program of study accredited by Australian Nursing and Midwifery Accreditation Council and approved by the Nursing and Midwifery Board of Australia. Registered nurses can complete the postgraduate studies leading to a registration as a midwife. At Charles Sturt Postgraduate midwifery students are employed in a collaborative working model in a public or private hospital throughout regional Australia, including New South Wales, Victoria, Tasmania, South Australia and Queensland. Students are supervised by a clinical midwifery educator to achieve clinical competency whilst also completing their university studies. Our industry partners play a crucial role in nurturing future midwives. Contemporary midwifery practice is also shaped by other factors, including imprinted professional practice, where teamwork and collaboration are crucial. This is especially important when the midwife may be dealing with complexities in pregnancy care, which is the focus of the clinical subject which underpins this project. Work integrated learning makes it easy to achieve authentic clinical learning experiences. However, integrating clinical learning with theoretical learning can sometimes be challenging. We don't do this integration to become a mere tick and flick exercise to get the uni part done, as some students may have mentioned, which can be disheartening. As a regional university, we also face unique challenges. Midwifery students in regional and remote areas often have limited access to clinical experiences. Therefore, it is crucial to develop assessment tasks that address these challenges, ensuring all students, regardless of location, have an equal opportunity to succeed. We also know that the assessment needs to be worthwhile and to the student. And I would say to our industry partners, it needs to be more than just meeting the learning outcomes of a subject. In this context, authentic assessment plays a major role. The authentic assessment tasks are developed to replicate the intricacies of real-world scenarios that students might face. Authentic assessment can bridge the gap between academic learning and professional clinical practice. It demands the use of a variety of knowledge, skills, and attitude-related abilities. When students see their learning relevant to the workplace, authentic assessments can foster deep learning, support professional growth, and increase motivation to study. Collectively, these benefits can contribute to a more effective and fulfilling clinical and university educational experience. The purpose of the study is to explore how an innovative assessment design can strengthen the alignment and authenticity of assessment tasks within a clinical subject of a graduate diploma of midwifery. We're using a mixed method approach to gather accurate and rich data to inform our results. Postgraduate midwifery students from the 2024-60 and the 2025-30 cohorts completing the complexities in midwifery care subject will be invited to participate. The clinical educators that support these student cohorts will also be invited to participate. An explanatory sequential design will be used to enhance the study's overall validity. This will involve both qualitative and quantitative approaches, such as focus group discussions with students and industry partners, and qualitative analysis of survey data. The actual process of gathering data will involve using Qualtrics to administer surveys that ask about basic demographic information, as well as how this assessment task relates to the subject content. Sam Jacomowitz will lead the focus group discussion with an arm's length approach. Sam is not involved in any way with the midwifery education. To help Sam host these discussion groups and gather rich data, we have created a few prompts. The focus group and Qualtrics surveys are currently in progress for the 2024-60 cohort. We wanted them to have finished their academic work for the session before they had a survey to complete or a focus group to attend. This mixed method approach ensures comprehensive data collection, providing a robust foundation for our analysis and conclusions. The assessment task includes a mock conference where students can review or research a contentious or controversial midwifery complexity. For instance, one presentation could focus on perineal injury, while another might address breech birth. As a result of which the student gains knowledge of the ways in which they can provide complex midwifery care. Students submit an abstract and their mock conference presentation, which is a 5 to 6 minute video where they present their findings from their literature review to their peers about the chosen topic or contentious issue. Each student must also provide peer feedback to one other conference submission in a topic that is different to their own, and ask a question which the presenter will answer as the final component of this task. That includes a 1 to 2 minute audio response to the questions posed. The mock conference helps students communicate complex ideas clearly and effectively to an audience of peers. This exchange of knowledge can inspire others and contribute to the advancement of midwifery knowledge and practice. The authentic nature of the complexity also provides real-world application for developing their professional knowledge and skills and builds networking opportunities within the cohort of students. Charles Sturt University graduate learning outcomes relate to equipping students with essential skills for real-world application, focusing on critical thinking, interprofessional practice, technology, cultural competency, and using information and research to develop and guide their own knowledge, learning, and practice. We achieve these outcomes in this assessment task, which is distinct from the other assessment tasks within the GDM, and anecdotally, students have commented that they enjoy participating in this conference. It is anticipated that this study will illuminate the authentic nature of assessments within the Graduate Diploma of Midwifery, benefiting both students and industry colleagues. This integrated approach ensures that knowledge flows seamlessly between students, industry, and university, enhancing the educational experience and professional practice. The significance and broader implications of this project for the university, we have alignment between authentic assessments that mirror real-world challenges and tasks that midwives encounter daily. Collaboration with industry is strengthened, ensuring that students' learning experiences align closely with their clinical practices. This approach prepares students not just for the immediate practice, but for lifelong learning and professional development. To the students, they get to engage with authentic assessment, which is critical for complexities in the clinical situations in midwifery. The peer-to-peer collaboration encourages students to learn from each other, share experiences, and develop teamwork skills essential for their interprofessional practice. This task is about utilising assessment for learning. They share their learning between their cohort. For industry itself, this collaboration is bi-directional, fostering strong ties, helps with bridging the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. This alignment is crucial for developing a future workforce that is competent, confident, and ready to handle the challenges of contemporary midwifery practice. Overall, this bi-directional relationship enhances both scholarly outcomes and practical skills. We're not sure where this may lead. We are hoping to present our findings at a professional conference. Scalability potential is enormous, and we review and evaluate our assessment task with regular feedback.
I hope you can hear me now, and I apologise that you missed my dulcet tones earlier. My microphone's been playing up. So just to conclude, it's nice to end obviously with a cute picture as well, but the reality is that midwives must be competent and meet inherent requirements to provide safe quality care to mothers and babies, especially when we're looking at complex situations. University and industry value their roles in supporting and nurturing midwives of the future. Authentic real-world, authentic real-world assessment tasks and support the student to contextualise what happens in their clinical practice. So utilising our existing and strong relationship with industry, it's a hope that this research project will continue to strengthen those relationships and further engagement in teaching scholarship.
That's excellent. Thanks very much. And credit to you both for dealing with the technical difficulties. Seems like there's always one. And credit to you, Jane. You didn't know there was going to be an on-the-spot test today, and you passed with flying colours. So
there you go. And I just wanted to thank Jared and Juan, who gave the inspiration for this project. And as colleagues, we then set about working with a marked rubric. He used the mock conference as a capstone, and to Sam Jacomowitz for the support that she's offered throughout this project.
Well, great.
And thank you for bearing with us as we dealt with the
sorry about that.
IT glitches.
Hiccup. Yes, yes. There's always got to be one. What teamwork makes the dream work is the old saying, right? So now I'm going to hand over to Kathleen, or Kate, if you prefer, Kate Smithers, who's got our next presentation for us. Okay, thank you.
All right. Hopefully you can see my slides there. Yep,
we
awesome.
can. Great, thanks.
So before I begin, I just want to say that I'm currently in the UK, so it's 1:30 a.m. in the morning. So if anything, if I'm a bit slower in responding to any questions later or anything like that, that could be why. So today I'm presenting on a scoping review about preparation and pedagogies for Australian honours students. And the work was supported by Sabrina Syed, listed there, who now works at the University of Newcastle, but was my research assistant. And this project was also funded by a Teaching Academy grant last year, so in 2023. So firstly, if I can get the slides to go next. I thought I would start by letting you know a little bit about honours courses. Some of you may have undertaken honours study and some of you may have never really come across this type of course before. So in Australia, we have two types of honours courses, the first being embedded, and that means that it's a year within a larger degree. So a student might be enrolled in a 4 or 5 year degree and complete honours coursework alongside other coursework, which means in their final year, they'll be working on a minor thesis of about 10,000 words alongside a supervisor, but it will be embedded into their degree. And then we have another type of program called an end-on honours, which is usually an additional year of study that students must enroll in separate to their first degree. And all of the course is focused on the honours project. So here at CSU, in all of the faculties, we do have an end-on honours course, and we also have some embedded ones in different programs. So the structure of these degrees can represent an uneasy mix of undergraduate degree and higher degree by research. Students are expected to undertake independent research, but they are also still somewhat at undergraduate level. So it can be quite confronting for students as they navigate this in-between of and new ways of conceptualizing their own knowledge in an area of study of their choice. So in most cases, students will begin to conceptualize their own arguments about the field of study and have much more autonomy over the projects and area of interest that they choose. So as of yet, there has not been a scoping review of the literature regarding honours students in Australian universities, and the honours degree in Australian universities is somewhat unique. There are very few countries that actually have a similar structure to the Australian honours degree. I think the research literature identifies New Zealand, Scotland, and South Africa as having the closest type of degree in honours. So with this scoping review, I followed the ARCSI and O'Malley 2005 procedure for a scoping review, which essentially provides a systematic way of searching the literature, and the steps are listed here, but I won't go through them today, as I think for a 10-minute presentation, the most important part is actually what I found in the literature. But if you're interested, you can have a look and see what their scoping review protocols are all about. So the research question is, what is currently known about supporting honours students? I kept it quite broad as I said, there hasn't been a scoping of the literature before. And their inclusion criteria was anything between 2003 and 2023, published in English about honours students. So if it was about doctoral students or undergraduate coursework students, it was excluded. It had to be about students in Australian universities. As I previously mentioned, we have a unique style of honours degree. So I tried to keep it to just Australia. And it had to be about supporting honours students or anything to do with the honours students' experience. So there were some papers that were just about research supervisors or just about course structure, which did not include research student voice. And so they were also excluded. This is just a Prisma overview of the papers that we found. So we had 145 papers identified in the search, and after screening, only 10 were included. So there were many studies that were either not from Australia or did not include student voice. In terms of the studies that were included, this is just to give you an overview of the field itself. Although from 10 studies, there's not much of a field, I would say, to draw on. So the participant numbers in these studies ranged from less than 10 to over 140 participants. They had a range of research methods, including surveys, evaluations of programs for supporting students, interviews, focus groups, and ethnographic reflections. The research was mostly qualitative research, and it was a mix of projects that ranged from student reflections on their own experience to academic evaluations, and through to academic evaluations using statistical analysis of satisfaction and depression rates. So quite a range of projects included in the field. There was also a range of disciplines represented. There was not really any one particular discipline that dominated the studies included. So you can see here on the slide, there was business, economics, engineering, human geography, psychology, Indigenous studies, and these areas, discipline areas, are the ones that were self-identified in the papers. So we might see some crossover of these in our own courses, but these were the ones that were specifically identified in the papers, and we left them as they were just to keep it true to those papers. So I'm going to now move into the themes from the research and then offer some, I guess, guidance for people who are supervising honours students, and then move on to what I would call guidance for institutions, because that's, I guess, the real thing that comes from a scoping review is insights into best practice and also insights into the research as a whole. So largely the research identifies that students often misunderstand the process of an honours year. Their expectations do not match the reality of the program, and they feel unprepared for the transition to the cyclical process of revision and rewriting. So this means essentially that students are used to an undergraduate course where they'll submit an assignment. They may get some feedback on it that they consider, but then they sort of move on to the next thing. Whereas in an honours year, students are expected to revisit and revisit and revisit that submission, whether that was a submission in the coursework attached or to their supervisor. And that can be quite confronting for some students in the beginning to understand the benefit of the feedback and be able to actually engage with that feedback. The research literature also identifies that effective supervision is key to the success of honours students, and that effective supervision includes trust, and it also includes tailoring of the supervision to the individual student. So that was a bit of a surprise, I guess, for us. We weren't expecting to find so much on the role of the research supervisor in the honours literature. And we also found from the papers that there are a variety of structures of honours programs nationwide. So it's hard to bring out from the papers included in this study, I guess, one honours course structure or one suggestion for what the coursework should look like. So now I'm going to move on to the pedagogical implications for the supervisor.
Just to give you a little push on time, because I know you still have quite a lot to cover. You have about a minute, 2 minutes left.
Awesome. Okay. All right.
Thanks. Then you can go back to bed.
So supervision begins with trust. Some studies suggest that student beliefs about their self-efficacy are entrenched prior to the honours year, so somewhat supervisors can't do anything about it. Students struggle to see their supervisor beyond a lecturer. So it could be important to foster a sense of mentorship. It's important to prepare students for the cyclical process of an honours thesis, normalize rewriting and show them your first drafts. Consider the honours year a transition from undergraduate thinking into doctoral thinking. So acknowledge that students aren't there yet, but part of your role as supervisor is to help them get there. Ask the students what support they need. Each student will have different needs. Things that have worked for previous students might not work for the current student. And acknowledge that there is an identity transformation involved in the process of honours. So provide your students with support services and let them know that it's normal for them to be feeling conflicting feelings or to be feeling overwhelmed. And then lastly, there's just 4 dot points here. It's important for support services that can support the emotional work which surrounds this transition of learning. Programs can incorporate supportive research communities to enable students to share that discomfort and consider how skills required for research can be embedded earlier into degrees for embedded programs. And it's important to develop a bank of resources for students to demonstrate specific tasks demonstrate specific tasks. And just a note here that this is further complicated by us in a regional university where most of our courses are delivered online. So how do we foster these things? And that's it. I'm done.
Excellent, Kate. Thanks so much. Give us a lot to think about with the unique situation of Australia. Okay, Alex.
Just making
Alex,
sure you
just
can see
check
that and hear
your
me.
just check you're not muted.
Am I
Yep.
good now?
Yep, can hear you now. Excellent. Thank you. Take it away.
Awesome. So my presentation's on investigating best practices for integrating project management frameworks into the research processes of PhD candidates, which I know is a mouthful, but I promise we'll get there in the short period of time that we have. So the PhD crisis. So currently, research has shown that between 33 and 70% of doctoral students fall out of the program through one form of another, which is not great. Research by Katz in 2018 showed that 60% of students in their final doctoral year had at least one crisis, and that could be professional, mental health, or something else. And of that, 7 in 10 didn't seek professional help. And then only 10% of PhD students completed within expected timeframes, according to a 2013 review article, which is not great. And we look at the Australian statistics, there's not much data to really go on, especially in recent years. It's quite hard to get access to. But as you can see here, that the mean candidature time for PhDs awarded in Australia started out in 2005, just around the 5-year mark. And then 2010 and 2017, we only had a minor improvement to 4.8, which, if you know the doctoral sort of structure in Australia, the government and the Department of Education tries to push for a 3.5, and maybe 4-year doctoral program. So that's well and truly above what is expected of the doctoral program. So how do we know that project management frameworks are applicable to doctoral programs or PhDs? And you can think about the triple constraint or the iron triangle of project management. If you're familiar with it, it's all about cost, time, and scope, and it's about managing those 3 to deliver your project to the desired quality. And obviously for PhDs, we always want it to be perfect, but it's never going to be the case. But we know that PhDs have deliverables, so theses, publications, experimental results, or collaborations. We know they're time bound, and that's generally due to either scholarship deadlines, grant deadlines, publication deadlines, or access to certain equipment. And we know that they're financially constrained. So they have a budget, which again is usually dictated through grants, funds, faculty, or operational sort of expenditures there. So now that we know that doctoral programs are projects and can be seen as projects, what project management frameworks are applicable? And if you've ever done project management, in any sort of capacity, there's generally two large schools of thought. You've got the traditional project management framework. So classical examples are infrastructure. So they usually are stage gated or phase gated, and they incorporate a whole bunch of tasks, and you don't move on to phase 2 or phase 3 until that previous phase has been signed off and completed. And then the second school of thought is the adaptive project management frameworks. And the classical example for this is software development, where they have iterative cycles of they deliver something, they iterate on it, they build new tasks or new objectives, and then they move on to the next phase, and they just keep trying to improve that one product in very short sprints. So when we look at traditional project management frameworks, there's three key papers about project management frameworks for research and for PhDs. So we've got Hulnick, Powers and Kerr, and Badu. Badu, sorry. And I think the most important one to call out in the expedience of time is Badu there from 2018. And they take the Project Management Book of Knowledge, which is a great tome of information on project management frameworks and tools, resources from the Project Management Institute, which is basically a global organization that lays out this tome. And they convert that into a 230-page framework for supervision of doctoral programs, feedback mechanisms, time management, and scheduling. But what all three of these models have in common is that they all expect clear and realistic goals to be set out at the planning stage, so prior to starting the doctoral program and at the very start of the doctoral program with the supervisor that aligns with the research needs. They also all recommend implementing progress tracking. And if you're familiar, again, with project management, you might have heard of Gantt charts or MS Project, as well as setting up KPIs or OKRs, which are another form of measuring output and task progression. And they all sort of call out the need for adaptive planning to address the uncertainty inherent in research and in doctoral programs. Because at the start, you might have a doctoral plan or an idea, but it might develop as you do more research and starts to narrow in. So they all recommend a constant cadence of looking at the planning and how can we change that to ensure that we're not going out of scope, but it aligns with what the research direction is. And then when we look at the adaptive project management frameworks, again, there's three key authors, Sahadi, Philbin, and Tenberg. And they all adapt certain parts of the Agile project management framework. So it can be Agile Scrum, Agile itself, or a sort of like a V methodology. And I can explain that later in Q&A, or I'm happy to send on the resources to help expand on some of these terms. But the key takeaway from these three authors is that they all recommend short sprints of either 2 to 6 weeks, where you sit down with the student and you'll plot out a series of tasks and expectations to go with it. And then you'll track that. And anything that isn't completed in that sprint gets put back into a backlog. And then you can reassess before the next sprint if that task is actually relevant. And if it is, you pull it back in and try and focus on getting that done as well as the other tasks. They also emphasize stakeholder management. We heard in the previous presentation that the communication between supervisors and students is exceptionally important. And in the doctoral program, because of that extended period of time and that sort of pressure that students feel, it's absolutely paramount. And again, these authors call out using digital tools to manage and track tasks, as well as foster transparency. So you might be familiar with Jira or GitHub, but they also say like Microsoft Project is also capable of doing this. So from the traditional and the adaptive project management frameworks, what are the key findings across all of it? And there's some other minor papers that weren't included in this presentation for brevity. And basically, the 6 key findings is to adapt hybrid frameworks. And this means that in project management, you can take bits and pieces of different frameworks and put them together into a complete completely new framework that is tailored to either your field or your students' requirements or the project's requirements. They all call out that training should be provided, and that's offering workshops, courses, certification programs to build the competencies for project management skills in both the students and in the supervisors. They all call out using tools like Trello, Asana, Jira, Microsoft Project as a method to track tasks and track progress. And the good thing about these is that you can have an overarching account that can see across multiple projects. So you can track a whole faculty or even the whole school with enough time and resources. They all call for establishing robust feedback mechanisms, so scheduled regular check-ins and feedback sessions to ensure continuous improvement. Most of them call out for the creation of something called a project management office and mentorship programs. And so a PMO is like a center of excellence or a knowledge center that these are the real experts in project management tools and project management frameworks, and they can assist supporting yourself or your students and do training, sit down, do mentorships. They do a lot of work. It's hard to condense. And then conduct more research. As you can probably guess, there's not much research in project management frameworks taken from the private sector and from project management theory that has been put into practice for research projects. And so the 6 key sort of authors I pointed out sort of put out their frameworks, but they haven't really run large-scale trials. There's been one paper in the US where they did a trial of Agile framework at Technology University, and they used that sort of framework to track and manage students doing computer science, but they didn't follow that on with an outcomes. So they just say, oh, we're implementing it, we're giving it a try. This is the framework we've used. But yeah, so we definitely need to do more pilots and do more research into this field. And that's my presentation. Thank you.
Excellent. Bang on time. Thank you, Alex. Okay, so before we move to questions, we've got one more presentation, and over to you, Sam.
Thank you very much. I'll just share my screen and we'll continue. Oh, pardon me. I need to ask you to give me permission to share, please. Here we go. And full
Thanks,
screen.
Mark. Great.
Thank you very much. And now I believe you can see what I can see. Thank you, Kelly. Excellent then. In that case, thank you everyone for your presentations so far. Alexander, it was excellent to hear your commentary just now regarding the project systems we can use to inform our HDR students. Kate Smithers, thank you very much as well for your work with honours. I'm now looking to something which is a much broader scope beyond our HDR students, even beyond our undergraduate students, to the public as a whole. How can we work as educators working with Australian communities? And I would like to make a provocation that the lecture is far from dead. Indeed, there are strong demands for the public lecture as one of the roles that we play as a regional Australian university. My work as an art historian included the presentation of a series of lectures called The Art of Everywhere Else back in 2022 as an in-person exercise. The idea behind The Art of Everywhere Else was a lecture series that I was going to be doing anyway in exactly the manner I'm doing now, talking to a laptop alone in my office with everyone listening in as students, mostly by recording. But I realized it didn't have to be this way, that you can do more with lectures as a form of performance theatre, as a public spectacle, reminding the public of our presence as a regional university and the kinds of work that we do with our students, opening this in the manner of an audit student experience, where they can come into an open door lecture, but not access recordings unless they were officially enrolled. So the movement from the in-person gatherings that were funded by Wagga Wagga City Council's arts and culture grants, as well as tickets for the first 5 weeks before the grant came through, making it free, was an important scoping step. This led to approximately 60 to 110 people per lecture in person, but this year we shifted the lectures online into live experiences Tuesday evenings, 6 till 7 p.m. And this was in collaboration with an organization called Arts National. It had no funding, but it reached more than 800 registered participants with an average of 300 people per lecture, tuning in not only from all across Australia, but around the world. And most interestingly, and perhaps unexpectedly, were the number of people writing in each week to say thank you or what they enjoyed. We did have a formal feedback system, which was asked of the students and or participants, what in this lecture was interesting or new to you? An open-ended response form. And this led to massive feedback totaling some 12,000 words by the end of the lecture series. This lecture series evolved from an Islamic art and design subject I developed for CSU 10 years ago. During our optimization, we had to rationalize numbers of students and expand the Islamic art and design subject into a truly global art history sequence, creating what many universities have, which is an introductory survey subject regarding global art history, but these are almost always positioned with a Western-centric perspective. This, instead, is a model centered firmly on Islamic art as central to world art movements. And its influences inform the use of gender, the use of craft, the use of art practices that are not normally included in museums. So we created a flyer brochure, which went out as a physical object. I have copies of them over here in my office. These little objects, which are designed for fridges, including the itinerary, the schedule, and how to log on. And we also created this in tandem with the Arts National members who meet in person across regional Australia and our metropolitan centres over some 30 different agencies. Arts National, formerly known as ADFAS, is a bit like Rotary, or these community organisations that meet to share a common interest in art and design. So they were a very sympathetic community group to link to our organisation, Charles Sturt. The logo that we use is adapted from a map, a compass rose from 1502. We wanted this to be evocative of the idea of everywhere beyond Australia. Art of everywhere else never includes Australia beyond the acknowledgement of countries in the beginning of the subject, whereas the compass rose here includes everything beyond, the idea of expanding from a central point. But the importance of maps was also critical to the design of the public lecture. We want to assume that anyone logging in at any stage is seeing a self-sustaining episode, a standalone documentary, as it were, presented live with some degree of theatre and charisma. This map was created to help guide students in their assessment items as to which area was covered by which week. The grey areas are special cases that could appear in more than one week if so desired, but never more than once in their assessment items. And in more specific terms, each week was introduced with a more specific map, marking exactly where the artworks discussed in each lecture came from, focusing on their provenance, knowing that their origin is often very different to their location today. Indeed, the commentary of the controversial sources and the challenges to colonization through the active efforts of decolonization in museums and provenance research is critical to the way Art of Everywhere Else celebrates human achievement and casts a light on the darker shadows of art history. But beyond the maps, we also have a recurring trope that in every lecture we open with a ship, a vessel that crosses water, the Art of Everywhere Else being by necessity a transition from Australia somewhere else. And in our land girt by sea, why do we not consider the sailing vessel as a metaphor for a shared journey of humans seeking to explore and discover things they have not seen before, literally expanding horizons? And we also consider the ways art informs people's lives. Here, not just looking at major works and unknown, but anonymous works, stamp design, philately, works on paper, and the implication of this for geography, history, society, and change through language, currency, and other political systems. I also flag here importance of concurrent events like the Anglo-Zanzibar War, the shortest war in history, and how that informs British art worldwide. But let's come back to this element here. of what exactly are we trying to do with the public lecture model. It is a spectacle. I want people to see the works at grand scale, to consider the work of a miniature work at small scale on a real page, at life size potentially, or expanded so it can be immersed in its intricacies. The way it was made, the reason it was made, and the sheer beauty of what was made. This is a public lecture series that has a certain bias towards the beautiful. And we want this because we are not necessarily asking anything of our students but their time as members of the audience who are simply interested in seeing things they've never seen before. And through that, we also have to focus on the people whose work is never normally seen in collections of art history and textbooks, the ephemeral, the intangible, and the very short-lived, the fugitive. In this case, kolam or rangali, rice flour drawings made traditionally by women across India, particularly South India. These are art forms that are often omitted from museums. But what I want you to notice about this in terms of lecture design is the visual poetry of slide transitions. Throughout the slides you've been seeing, there has been a continuous thing which is anchoring one slide into the next, not just thematically, but visually. The ship, the dhow, the maps of Africa, the world map, each of these has a rhyming sequence and structure which is essential to the design of the art of everywhere else, creating a flowing form like a visual cinematic experience where the game of anticipating and spotting the rhyme is consistent. It also provides a very useful segue for me as a speaker to know what's coming up next. But another part of this game is intimacy. The public lecture, speaking to a room of 1,000 people at a time, which is technically what's happening when you're doing an online lecture to a large audience, loses something of the immediacy of the one-to-one conversation that we are having right now, the Oxford-style tutorial of the Don and the student in the room together in a comfortable space, hopefully with a cold drink of some kind. But when we are considering this form, I'm including references to my family, to my own life. Here we have a book by my father, Robert Bowker, Tomorrow There Will Be Apricots, and a quilt by my mother, Jenny Bowker, which both appeared in the Art of the Middle East lecture, with a reference to why my family is connected to this place and why it informs the type of work I do. Thank you for the time warning. This fundamentally comes back to the need to engage public lectures with people's lives. Our students are part of our people. They are not necessarily the only people we reach. This is principles of universal design for learning, to think how can people outside our enrolled cohorts benefit from what we do? And the fundamental question for all of us of what might the best possible university subject look like? We have here one of the letters from my students noting that this was a safe haven of joy for them during a very difficult semester. And we can engage the lecture as an assessment item. Sketchbooks are AI resistant and require the student to draw 2 things they found which were not mentioned in the lecture. So they expand on the lecture and nature of a conversation here. They can cite the lectures in their tutorial sketchbooks, but we talk about how to draw and why we draw as a process of seeing what we are saying and saying what we are seeing by talking as we draw in real time in tutorials. The result was that there was a strong demand for sustained connection. People were captivated by these lectures, and they were important to hold not just as singular events with celebrity speakers, but every week as part of a weekly ritual. People gathered in each other's houses to see these lectures. They had glasses of wine before and dinner afterwards. People listened a podcast on Radio National while making dinner and in caravan parks while traveling. People talked about how the lectures informed their museum visits as they were traveling overseas in real time on the bullet train, apparently, where they were listening to a downloaded version. So all of this comes back to the importance of what we do as Charles Sturt University, a university of our people and regions. If we can reach beyond our classrooms, it behooves us to do so. Thank you all very much.
Excellent, Sam. Thank you very much. It was a very engaging presentation. I thought the flow of presentations was great because we've gone from the birth process to the honors process to the PhD to the greater public in the world at large. So I'll hand over now to see if anybody has any questions for any of our presenters. Okay, I might just throw a question at Kate, if you're still with us. One of the things that you mentioned was that students are really unprepared going into an honors program for that process of writing. That really resonated with me as a recovering English and humanities high school teacher, and trying to guide students that you're not just going to spit out the correct answer like you can with maths just by following a process. It's a totally different kind of process. So what do you think can be done and put in place to, I suppose, prepare them but not scare them? Or what did your research point you to?
I guess part of the process is that modeling, and also I guess showing students that not everyone produces the perfect piece of writing in the beginning. So having resources where they can, so one of the suggestions in the literature is having resources that model research skills. So having a bank of resources available to all of the students in the institution or the course, where they can look at information about editing, or information about the first draft, what the first draft looks like, or information about how to structure or plan, but also at the role of supervisor. You can, I think in the literature, there was an example of a supervisor showing a first draft and saying, this is my first draft. This is what it looks like. It is messy, it's incomplete, it's not perfect. To break down that, I guess, that barrier as well of lecturer and student, to sort of try and bring it to more equal colleagues working together on a research project. So I think there are multiple things that can be done. And if it's an embedded course, introducing assessment tasks where students are updating or changing their writing based off feedback for the next assessment task can also be useful, I think. And there's also something that's done in high schools, because I'm a high school teacher, which I think could be useful, where students reflect on their own assessment, like how much did I put into this, how did I plan, when they actually submit the assignment, which I know some people do at CSU, but it's not a common practice, I don't think.
Yeah, great. Thank you. I also applaud you because when you started, it seems like when you started to look at the literature, your pool went from, I mean, it was already kind of fairly niche, but then it just got smaller and smaller. And it's always that wicked problem of research of finding that gap in the literature where something hasn't been done, and then finding enough that you actually have enough building blocks to put something together to make your own research. So, well done with that one. Anybody have any questions? I can throw another one out there. Alex, Alex is still here?
Yeah.
Did you want to talk any more about the V approach with the adaptive project management?
I can, but it's quite a complex methodology that's been adapted from rapid application development.
That's okay. I just wanted to throw it out there in case you felt like you were a little rushed for time and there was more that you wanted to circle back to. So that's what we have, the bonus few minutes at the end is to allow for that.
No, I mean, the only
good.
sort of remarks I would say is that project management frameworks are there to be your friend, not to distract or add unnecessary skills.
Admin and
yeah, I mean, I've worked for PwC, Department of Defense, Navantia Australia. Like, I've worked on billion-dollar projects, and without these methodologies, you're never going to be able to deliver what you need. So it's worth looking into, and I know CSU does project management at the master's level, so I would encourage tapping them for their expertise.
Yep. Great. Thanks for that. So it looks like Jenny's popped a question in the chat for Sam. So how do students cope with assessments that require sketching if they can't draw stick figures? It's a great question.
It is a great question. Thank you very much, Jenny. And the fact is that we can draw stick figures. We have, and I'm absolutely fine with a student drawing a stick figure with annotations, because truly the research which is actually assessed is their ability to find the artworks which relate to the topic that they've chosen to investigate. For each sketchbook is themed on a manner which we discuss what makes good themes, what makes less effective themes, and the types of themes which I haven't yet seen explored but could be explored. But we also do exercises with live drawing with a timer, and the idea that you can have in a sketchbook a loose, unfinished thing, often from multiple different attempts at drawing the thing, because the annotations can describe what you're intending to do, even if your drawing doesn't quite show it as intended. I have an example here. One of our students had an issue with a kind of writer's block. They'd done the hard research of finding the objects, so they were most of the way there, but they felt they could not draw. So we had, oh, it's a bit tricky with my screen being what it is, but we did an exercise of drawing in real time where we both had the same image that she'd found on our computer screens on Zoom. We gave each other a 3-minute timer and variously handed over the commentary on what was being drawn. And we described the part of the drawing we were managing, or the color we were using, or whatever thing it was we were doing at the time. And this act of verbal annotations while drawing meant that we created drawings which were responding to what we were seeing directly. Even if the drawing didn't look quite as they were seeing on the screen, we could see what they were doing as they were doing it. And the sketchbook has that same emphasis of being a system that annotates what you are seeing. It doesn't have to describe it accurately. And indeed, the assessment rubric for drawing does not include quality of drawing specifically. It includes the number of ways in which the person attempted to describe the object. So these things are considered, not necessarily the quality of the drawing. Stick figures are allowed.
That's great. Thanks for that, Sam. I also would like to ask, do you think that you have, first of all, it's great to hear that you don't think that the lecture is dead, and it's great that you're bringing information to the wider public, but do you think part of the appeal is because of the nature of your topic? As you said, it has great applicability for people who are artists, traveling, a whole host of potential uptake.
I'm sure it is. I think of a space we don't often talk about in Australian art called participative arts, which is separate from professional practice and creative practice research. Participative arts should include literally everyone as a person who can make and enjoy these forms, which edge on serious leisure or sheer recreation. So I have an advantage in working in a field where this community exists. And for that reason, it might be more difficult to expand this to other fields. But there's elements in which the action of even giving one specialist public lecture could perhaps borrow from the things we've learned here. There is community demand. And after all, we see these on broadcast media like ABC, SBS, international podcasts, and other variations. So all of our fields have a community access participative element, whether it's we're going through the experiences the professionals are helping us with, or we are seeing the impact of those professionals on our lives. So I think all of us can benefit from the consideration of what a public lecture might do for our fields. Thank you.
That's great. Thanks very much. Well, we've only got about a minute left, so if there's no further questions, I will just formally wrap up the session. So I'd like to say thank you first to our excellent presenters, Dolores and Jane in particular, for being able to jump in at a moment's notice with no warning. To Kate, thank you for your 1:30 a.m. wake up. So we really appreciate it. Alex and Sam, so thank you all very much. I think you've all given us a lot to think about and take away from today. And I think that's one of the real joys of having these opportunities every year with CSEdX and other professional communities where we get to learn from each other. So there is a link to a feedback form. So if you could just take a minute at the end of the session and fill that up. And I think, without further ado, that's everything. And Mark's going to stop recording for us. So thank you, everyone, for your attendance today. It was great.
Thank you.